Good morning and welcome to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. Every 51 minutes on average, someone's killed in a drunk driving crash, and every 90 seconds, someone's injured because of this entirely preventable crime. Our focus this morning is on an organization that's considered the nation's largest nonprofit working to protect families from drunk driving and underage drinking, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And my guest is John Vose, who's a spokesperson and volunteer for MAD. Good morning, John.
Well, thank you, Andrea, for having me, and thank you for paying attention to this very important topic, especially this time during the holiday season.
The perfect time to have you here,
Absolutely.
That is for sure. And MAD has a campaign to eliminate drunk driving, and you focus on 3 important steps that really we all can take to help make a difference.
Absolutely. The number one thing we'd love to do is put ourselves out of business to completely eliminate drunk driving. And the good news is that this will happen. It is definitively possible. And the campaign to eliminate drunk driving, as you mentioned, has 3 significant parts to it. The first part is to support our heroes. And those are the men and women of law enforcement who work tirelessly for the safety of ourselves, the safety of our roadways, and especially during this holiday season when we're out with family, friends, having celebrations, during the holidays, during New Year's Eve. They're out in the roadways, regardless of the weather, regardless of the time of day, protecting us, taking care when there is accidents. We can't say enough to thank them for all the hard work they do, to protect ourselves, and especially from drunk drivers who shouldn't be on the road in the first place.
I totally agree, and there are a couple other things that people can do as far as these 3 steps.
Yes, and the other 2 steps are sober to start, and where that is basically from the very beginning to not allow someone who has been drinking, especially repeat offenders, to get into a vehicle, and that's where ignition interlocks play a huge role. There are 24 states in the country right now that have passed all offender interlock legislation. What that means is that if they've even had one offense for a drunk driving incident, then they would be required, even after that first offense, from then to have an ignition interlock for a period of time, to get them in a habit of not, getting into a vehicle after they've been drinking. And the third part of our campaign to eliminate drunk driving is really what you could say is most exciting part, and that's securing our future. We've realized that over the 30-plus years that MAD has been in existence, that there's only so much you can do to change people's attitudes and change people's behaviors. Since 2003, for example, in Wisconsin, we have reduced drunk driving fatalities by 47%.
That's awesome.
It is. It's a wonderful number, but it's not zero. And the problem is the last 5 years, we've had very little impact on lowering that number. And we realize that science has shown us and technology has shown us that there's only so much you can do to change people's behaviors and attitudes. But what you can do is you can change the technology. You can set technology to the point, or you can work with technology to develop it so that a day in the future will be when any of us get into a vehicle, that vehicle will not start if we've been drinking, if we're over a certain limit at that point. And that's where there's a lot of funding going into, a lot of research going into right now. So we'll get to a point, just like 30 years ago, mandatory seatbelts weren't even on people's radar, didn't even think about it. And today those airbags, anti-lock brakes, all those devices have come in the last 30 years and we're all used to them. So imagine a point in time in the future where we're just used to getting into the vehicle, know if we've had too much to drink, it won't start.
Yeah, very good points. And you talk about changing people's behavior. And one of the main things when you talk about behavior is the mentality that people are convinced that it won't happen to them, or they just had one drink, and there is a such thing as buzzed drinking. So you don't want people getting behind the wheel in that manner as well.
Absolutely. The goal is to completely eliminate, if someone has been drinking, not only the desire or making the decision that I'm not going to get into that car after I've been drinking. And if I have any doubts about my ability to drive that car, I should make the decision not to get behind the wheel of a vehicle. And there's a number of alternative sources to get you home.
Yep.
At that point in time, there are rideshare programs. There are new organizations out there like Uber and Lyft and ride-sharing programs that people can use. There are taxis. There are friends designating a sober driver. The key thing is that prior to going to an outing or a party or a bar or wherever it is that you're going, think ahead. Think ahead of how you're going to get home from that event safely, because the worst thing you can do, especially this time of holiday season, is to be drunk behind the wheel of a car and cause an injury or fatality to yourself or others.
That's right. So you have this Power Talk 21, and that's a national day that's set aside specifically for parents to talk to their kids. Tell us a little more about that.
Well, in the last 5-6 years, we've really focused on the science behind driving drunk, and have done a lot of both science and technological surveys to say, okay, what can we do to change people's behaviors? And when it comes to underage drinking and underage drinkers, what we've found out is if typical studies will show that 1 in 4 teenagers will say that they've been drinking. But if you go and survey parents, 1 out of every 100 parents will say they think that their teenager has been drinking. So the distance between those two surveys is huge, and the thought behind it and the research behind it says that if parents have this one-on-one talk, with their teenagers, about the challenges, the dangers, the responsibility of drinking, and even more importantly, driving drunk, then what ends up happening is those teenagers, that message resonates with them for a longer period of time than any other official having that conversation with them. The power of parents is immense. And so our goal is to utilize that power of parents, have that discussion with teenagers, so that they start drinking when they're 21, not at some point in time before that.
Yeah, lead by example is basically what it boils down to. And we've seen situations in the news, and I've talked to other organizations, and they have that concern of parents who will throw a party in their home, and they think that if they're serving alcohol, they're all home, so it's okay. But there is a responsibility on that end as well. You're breaking the law if you're serving alcohol to underage drinkers.
Yeah, that's truly a terrible example for parents. To say, okay, let's bring all the kids in, let's have a party here, and they're going to be safer in my home drinking, than if they're anywhere else. And the lessons that teaching is the opposite of the lesson. Instead, bring those kids together, have a party, create an environment that isn't alcohol-based. There's so many things that you do. For example, if you go to a University of Wisconsin athletic event, you can't drink at that event.
Okay.
All right. But you can have a wonderful time at a football game or at a hockey game or at a basketball game, at that particular event. So for teenagers, what parents should do is, like you said, Andrea, lead by example. Show them how you can do this, without alcohol. And then when you are 21, absolutely go ahead and use alcohol responsibly. Drink at that point in time. Just don't get behind the wheel of a car.
Absolutely. Something that Matt specializes in is victim services, and that's something that I'm sure that you're very proud of, in the sense that people have somewhere to turn when they have been a victim of drunk driving. So if you could tell us a little bit more about what it is you offer to victims in this scenario.
No, and thanks for bringing that up. We are one of the largest victim service organizations in the United States, and any victim, any survivor can contact us simply by 877 MAD HELP. So 877 MADD HELP. Just give us a call. The services are free. We don't charge anything for that. But it's a very traumatic experience at that point in time. Not only for the survivors, but for the relatives of the survivors, those associated with it. How do they navigate through the court system? How do they navigate through the health system? We have advocates, trained advocates, that can help do that, and we're happy to do so.
I like that, and that's 24-hour line that's there to help. And there are a lot of corporate sponsors who have jumped on board, so to speak, with Mothers Against Drunk Driving to say that we support this organization, and we also want to help in spreading the message and the awareness. So just to name a few, the NFL, General Motors, State Farm, Dallas America, and Nationwide, they all are on board, and many of them actually do video contests and things of that nature for young people, kind of driving home the message of not getting behind the wheel after you've had a drink, but also having incentives with that.
Well, and videos, carry a powerful message,
Yeah.
as you well know in the occupation that you have. And our corporate sponsors have been wonderful over the years, and we couldn't have done it without them, but also without the thousands of volunteers, who volunteer within our organization.
Yeah.
And many of our dollars come from individuals, throughout, the country also. But certainly corporate sponsors helping to get that message out that, the whole drink and drive, that little phrase didn't exist before 1980. Before MAD, started, there was no, don't drink and drive. It wasn't even a thought among most drivers, because drunk driving was continuing to escalate. Since MAD formed, we've seen it continue to go down year after year after year, and every year we've seen more corporate players, more government entities, more individuals, join the organization and say, we can stop this. Because the one thing about drunk driving, it doesn't matter about what sex you are, what age you are, what race you are, what religion you are. It affects everybody exactly the same way.
Yeah.
It's taking lives, it's destroying people, and this is an entirely, as you started out with at the beginning, a very preventable, crime. That people just have to make the decision to do that, but there are steps we can help to help them realize that and help educate of what the consequences.
Yeah, and I've mentioned earlier that you are a volunteer.
Yes.
So everything that you do in regards to the messaging and the hard work that MAD does on a daily basis is volunteer. Why is it important for you to do that?
Well, it's important because I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, I'm a husband, I have family members. I never want to get that phone call. I never want to receive that knock on the door from the policeman who's arriving at my house to tell me something that he doesn't want to share with me. And in my voice and in my career, I've had an ability to be able to carry forth a message. So if I can do this with an organization like MAD, I'm more than happy to do it. And there are things that we can do, both individually to make the decision not to drive drunk and not to let our friends drive drunk, but also here in the state of Wisconsin, there's things that we can do to lower the number of drunk driving fatalities and drunk driving incidents without any major funding required by the government. Two of them. One, as I mentioned earlier, ignition interlocks. We do not require in Wisconsin ignition interlocks for all offenders in Wisconsin. We only require them for the second offender and the first time offender if they have a blood alcohol content of 0.15 or higher. We need to and we should require them for all offenders. It doesn't cost the government, or taxpayers, any more money to pass that piece of legislation.
Okay.
It should be passed. It's very easy. The other thing that we should do, which most states allow, is something called sobriety checkpoints. What you want to be able to do is, when you change people's behavior, is create an attitude where I don't want to get caught, if I'm driving drunk. So I won't drive drunk. And sobriety checkpoints are a very, very good deterrent in the states that use them, to prevent, drunk driving. And Wisconsin is actually one of the few states that has a law that says you can't, law enforcement can't use sobriety checkpoints. And this is, again, another tool that wouldn't cost anything to taxpayers. There would be no major funding required by, state government. Those two laws would certainly have an additional dramatic impact on reducing drunk driving first-time offenders and reducing, drunk driving multiple offenders. And the last statistic that I'd like to share, you mentioned earlier about, people who think it's not going to happen to them. But one little unknown fact in Wisconsin is that over 70% of all the fatalities that are caused by drunk drivers are caused by first-time offenders. There's a number of good laws that are on the books already. There's a challenge in some jurisdictions about actually, enforcing the punishment, that goes along with those laws. So we'd certainly like to see those laws that are out there enforced already. But we do know that ignition interlocks work. We do know that things like sobriety checkpoints work. We do know that deterrence works. We do know that ride-sharing programs work. And so all those different elements that work to reduce drunk driving are things that we're going to support.
Well, I certainly thank you so much for your time in coming by, especially during the holiday season when
pleasure.
people are preparing to get out and celebrate. And I think I speak for a lot of people when I say thank you for volunteering and making a difference in the lives of people every day.
Well, thank you, Andrea, and thanks for bringing this topic to all your viewers.
It's been my pleasure. John Vose is a spokesperson and volunteer for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and you can call 1-877-MAD-HELP for the 24-hour helpline, or log on to mad.org for information on anything that we've discussed. When we return to Our Issues Milwaukee, we'll be joined by a representative from Miller Coors who will give you details on how you can celebrate bringing in the new year responsibly. We'll find out more about Miller Lite free rides and a whole lot more right after this.